Here we are streaming live on August 18th on a Saturday midday. I just recorded a video before this that talks about, are you really red-pilled? And now we're going to go into a little more detail. We're talking about the 15 reasons we don't trust the media. We're talking about Mockingbird media versus Cueanon, right? So this will get into the details of exactly how we, as the independent media or the alternative media, trying to give truth, and why we don't believe in the mainstream media, why we don't trust them. So let's dig into that and figure out why you shouldn't trust the media. So a lot of people are online from the previous video, and now see people coming online. Good to see you, Dream with me, and Max, and the Troll Man, and Joanne, and Mike H, and Crypto T. Good to see you guys. So here we are, 15 reasons we don't trust the media. Mockingbird media versus Cueanon, right? Let's dig into those 15 reasons. Okay, here we are. We're going to actually go to a PowerPoint here that's going to give us that. Is the Mockingbird media controlling your mind? You know what the Mockingbird media is? 4 a.m. talking points, propaganda from the deep state or the cabal, giving 4 a.m. talking points to you. And what's the 15 reasons why you shouldn't believe them? Because Jim Morrison says whoever controls the mind, whoever controls the media controls the mind. Listen to that quote again. Whoever controls the media controls the mind. Jim Morrison. So is the Mockingbird media controlling your mind? And here's the 15 reasons why we do not trust the media. Let's get into it. So here we are on 15. Number 15 is fake news in the 1880s. Way back in 1880, there's a guy named John Swinton. He was born in 1829, died in 1901. And after a career in journalism, here's what he said. And these remarks were apparently made by Swinton. Then the preeminent New York journalist, probably one night in 1880, Swinton was a guest of honor at a banquet given to him by the leaders in his craft. Someone who knew neither the press nor Swinton offered a toast to the independent press. The independent press, here back in 1880. And here's what Swinton outraged, and with his colleagues, he said by replying this. What did he say? These two paragraphs are key because this is the truth of the way the media is now as well. So let's read it. There is not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions. If you did, you know beforehand that it would never appear in print. I am paid weekly for keeping my honest opinion out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who would be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be out on the streets looking for another job. If I allowed my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper, before 24 hours, my occupation would be gone. The business of journalism is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And the folly is this toasting an independent press. So he says, you know it and I know it. And what folly is this toasting an independent press? We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. And here's a source for that. Richard O'Brien and the Untold Story, published in 1955. So you can go look at that yourself. So the 15th reason why we don't believe in the media or trust the media is because they had fake news way back in the 1880s. So now the rest of a lot of my sources is going to be this book, The Killing of Uncle Sam, has tons of notes, hundreds and hundreds of notes, maybe even 1,000 if you go back and look at this. So this book is awesome. It's called The Killing of Uncle Sam, The Demise of the United States of America. And it talks about how the New World Order controls the media and created and runs the CIA. I mean, right? Most likely from the Mossad as well. Now, the 14th reason why we don't trust the media. because of the fake news in the 1890s. Let's go 10 more years ahead. And you'll see chapter 4 in this. It talks about the lure of the cult. The cult. And then 1876, there was this vision of the New World Order that Cecil Rhodes got. And Cecil Rhodes was a Rhodes Scholar guy, right? He became a light bearer of the of Freemason. I believe he got a satanic vision of the New World Order. And then he got with the Rothschilds later. So in 1890s, the Society of the Elect, he put these secret societies together. He agreed to establish schools, the acquisition of newspapers, creation of lectureships, and creating propaganda. They were social Darwinists that believed the British, by the power of the natural selection, had evolved the master race. Believed in reincarnation, that departed spirits can create great truths. So they rejected Jesus Christ. They rejected the God of the Bible, all these New World Order people. And Steed, the journalist, was most grounded in the dark arts. So he was literally a journalist, right? His name was Steed, and he was a disciple of the occultist Helena Blavatsky, and she taught theosophy, and Cecil Rhodes, who founded the New World Order, and was into this and had volumes of books on this occultish stuff called theosophy. So that's one reason we don't trust him. In the 1890s, you had the New World Order take control of a lot of propaganda and journalists. And in chapter 6, it gets into more details. The Rhodes started in 1902, the Rhodes Scholars, mostly given to American scholars, the best and the brightest that could obtain prominent position in academics, politics, and the media. Why? To undermine the nation's sovereignty, because they wanted to have a one world government, the New World Order. Massive money came into the Rhodes Fund from the Carnegie United Kingdom Trust, an organization associated with J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller. So massive money, first with the Rothschilds in England, but in America it came from Carnegie and also J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller, as they sent all these people to Oxford to get brainwashed into the New World Order, deny the biblical God, and then go try to push their New World Order one world government. Now, the 13th reason why we do not trust the media is the fake news started World War I. Yes, that's right. You heard me. The fake news started World War I. It's very well documented. In chapter 12 of this book, The Killing of Uncle Sam, it talks about the war to end all wars. There was a $500 million war loan. The House of Carnegie and Morgan intertwined once Carnegie co-signed a $500 million loan from J.P. Morgan and Company to the Anglo-French Financial Commission in 1914, which funded the Allied war against Germany and was the largest foreign loan in history, 5x the size of the $100 million loan to Great Britain for the Boer War. It's as such a large amount, so the cabal had to assure they tipped the scales to the Allies. So they needed what? They needed the U.S. involved. And we were very isolationist. We didn't like to get involved in foreign wars. That was part of our founding fathers' vision, right? So what they do? They did stage terrorism, an FF right here, right? An incident had to be created to provoke the American people to abandon the stance of isolationism and to enter the war. It came on May 7th, 1915, when a German sub sank the Lusitania. Americans were not told that it was transporting 6 million rounds of ammunition to Britain. The manifest was hidden based on orders from President Wilson. The Lusitania was also instructed to proceed at greatly reduced speeds without escort. So fake news that this was shot down with no reason. They actually brought it toward the U-boat. So basically, that's why we're talking about this, right? World War I fake news. The cabal planted fake news about Germany in the MSM, including the New York Times, such as German soldiers mutilating Belgian babies and cutting off their hands and even eating them. Many more stories were planted, many of which later were proven false. On February 9, 1917, Congressman Oscar Callaway inserted a statement into the Congressional Record about Morgan's ability to control and manipulate the national news. That's right, a wealthy banker is manipulating the news. He's part of the New World Order. This is the Mossad, the New World Order, all controlling our media. Morgan's men started with 179 newspapers and realized that it just needed to control 25 of the greatest newspapers to control the narrative. With Morgan's control of the newspapers, the American people never knew the real reason the doughboys were dispatched to the trenches of France. Here's something really wild. Making hay out of it. Wilson's biographer acknowledged that the war had been escalated and prolonged to lay the foundation for a world government, writing whether or not British Ambassador Sir Cecil Spring Rice was correct in his belief that Marburg, the force behind the Carnegie-funded League to Enforce Peace, and the Internationals had brought on the war, certain it is they proposed to make hay out of it. Make more money, keep the war going. So here's the summary of World War I. It was produced by fake news. No babies in Belgium were being mutilated, nor were Catholic nuns having breasts hacked off. And the Lusitania was such when British High Command lured the ship to a site where a German U-boat was waiting. Millions were sent to their deaths because they believed what they read in the newspapers. Those very newspapers that were controlled by J.P. Morgan. The 12th reason we do not trust the mainstream media. Fake news started World War II. The Hitler problem in 1942. Within 2 weeks of the outbreak of the war in Europe, Walter Mallory, the executive director of the CFR, this is that evil New World Order-led Council of Foreign Relations that still today controls the media, and Hamilton Fish, the editor of CFR's periodical Foreign Affairs, Complete Propaganda, met in Washington with Assistant Secretary of State George Messersmith, another Council of Foreign Relations member. The CFR is the key to the connection into the cabal that controls the 4 a.m. talking points. To set up this study group, which could develop a wartime strategy for the U.S., the group, which met in secret, that's a very important thing, is that all these groups that control our money supply and control the press, they meet in secret, became known as the War and Peace Studies Project. One of the tasks of the War and Studies Project was to develop propaganda that would cause the American people to shed their isolationism and to support participation in the European war to make the world safe for democracy. Right. What'd they do instead? They wanted to bait the Nazis and the Japanese in. The New World Order, this is chapter 21 of the Killing of Dr. Sam. The New World Order money cartel had much more to gain from World War II as the war broke out down the borders. They caused mass migrations and they gave rise to new countries. It promulgated diversity and undermined racial structures of existing nations, the benefits needed for creation of a global government. They want wars. It's going to help them get their global government, the New World Order's global government. It was essential to bring the U.S. into the European conflict, but America possessed no vital interest in the war, and America remained isolationist. An incident had to be staged that was even more horrific than the sinking of the Lusitania. 2 CFR groups, the War and Peace Studies Group and the Century Group, again, this is the Council of Foreign Relations, instigated FDR shipping 50 destroyers and millions of rounds of ammunition to Great Britain. FDR closed German consulates, occupied Iceland to deploy depth charts against the U-boats. Now, they didn't take it, though, so Hitler did not attack because he didn't want U.S. in it, right? So FDR produced bogus maps. Here's the fake news, saying Hitler's plan was to place South and North America under the Third Reich. The map was a forgery. FDR also falsified claims that he possessed another document which showed that Hitler sought to abolish Christianity in order to produce an international Nazi church. But Hitler refused to respond. So all this was fake news, trying to piss off Hitler. And fake news trying to change the perception of Americans. Nobody knew it was fake news at the time, though. Right? Because they controlled all the newspapers. J.P. Morgan controlled all the newspapers, and the Council of Foreign Relations did their 4 a.m. talking points. I would imagine they had 4 a.m. talking points set now. We know they do now. But they maybe have a different mechanism back at this point in time. To put a crippling... But Hitler refused to respond, so Rockefeller controlled CFR groups, started provoking Japan, and talked FDR into putting crippling trade embargo on Japan, and eventually froze all Japan's financial assets. By 1941, U.S. military intelligence had broken the radio code that Tokyo used to communicate with the embassies, and were aware of the Pearl Harbor attack and informed FDR and others. No warning was given. In fact, several weeks before the island was actually stripped of 2/3 of its surveillance planes and much of its defenses. So they literally took out surveillance planes, took out defenses, and the result was 2,000 Americans dead and 18 naval vessels sunk or heavily damaged. What do you think that resulted in? Resulted in Americans getting pissed off and supporting the war. So basically, the summary of number 12 is that they started. The reason we don't believe in the mainstream media and trust the mainstream media is because they got us into World War II. Fake news in the 1950s is the 11th reason why we don't trust mainstream media. This talks about 3,000 salaried and contract CIA were engaged in propaganda in the 1950s. This is Alex Constantine in this book. Some 3,000 salaried and contract CIA employees were eventually engaged in propaganda efforts. Wisner was also able to restrict newspapers from reporting about certain events. For example, the CIA plots to overthrow the governments of Iran and Guatemala. This was all in the 1950s. 11th reason why we don't believe or trust the mainstream media. The 10th reason we don't trust the mainstream media is because they were fake news in 1960s. In fact, we just learned this 50 years later. These are new documents just released by Trump last year. You can see the word Mockingbird down here. Summaries are being provided. The case of 2 newspaper reporters in Mockingbird, right? And here is the wording talking about that the CIA employed some 40 journalists who doubled as undercover contracts. And one of the journalists named in these report is covering the assassination probe for one of the most widely read newspapers. This is Operation Mockingbird. They had something else called Project Mockingbird, which was just basically spying on a couple of reporters. I'm talking about Operation Mockingbird, which is 100 times bigger. In fact, this is a lie. They admitted to having 40 journalists in the newspaper, but studies have shown they had 400 to 500 just in 1957. So Operation Mockingbird is real. Now, it's been painted as a conspiracy theory. In fact, when you look at the JFK files, they confirmed that there's also CIA hit list and bounties. They also confirmed that they were working with organized crime. So the CIA, this is a mobster cabal control of the media. It's not good people. The 9th reason we don't trust mainstream media, because the fake news, these mainstream media created the conspiracy theory label. It was actually the CIA working with the fake news. In 1967, the CIA created the label conspiracy theorist to attack anyone who challenged the official narrative of the fake Warren Commission report. Right? You've heard of the Warren Commission report that was just saying how Kennedy died. We now know it was false. It was led by Alan Dulles, who potentially was one of the persons who actually orchestrated the murder of JFK. So this says democracy and free market capitalism were founded on conspiracy theorists. The Magna Carta, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence, and other founding Western documents were based on conspiracy theories. Greek democracy and free market capitalism were also based on conspiracy theories.